Olivia Bennet was having the kind of day that made her question all her life choices. First, her biggest client had canceled their contract with a vague email about going in a different direction. Then her laptop, the lifeline of her graphic design business, decided to crash in the middle of a crucial project. And now, as if the universe was playing some cruel joke, she was standing in an upscale jewelry store, watching her ex-boyfriend Jason Miller slip an enormous diamond ring onto the finger of a gorgeous model. "Do you like this one, darling?" Jason asked in a sickeningly sweet voice Olivia had never heard during their 2-year relationship. The woman Vanessa, if Olivia remembered correctly from her Instagram stalking, let out a high-pitched giggle. "It's perfect! I can't wait to be Mrs. Miller." Olivia felt her stomach twist into knots. This was the same man who had broken up with her 6 months ago, claiming he wasn't ready for anything serious, and that commitment was just a societal construct designed to limit creative expression. Yet here he was, ready to commit to someone else. She tried to back away quietly, hoping to escape before being noticed, but her elbow knocked against a display of watches, causing a small commotion. Jason looked up, his eyes widening in recognition. "Olivia?" he called out, his voice a mixture of surprise and discomfort. She froze, plastering on the fakest smile she could muster. "Jason! What a coincidence!" Vanessa clung to Jason's arm possessively, eyeing Olivia from head to toe. "Oh, is this your friend?" The way she said friend made it clear she knew exactly who Olivia was. "Ex-girlfriend," Jason corrected, looking uncomfortable. "Olivia, this is Vanessa, my fiancé." "Congratulations," Olivia managed, her voice strained. "I thought you weren't the marrying type." Jason cleared his throat. "People change." "Clearly," Olivia replied, crossing her arms. Vanessa tilted her head with mock sympathy. "And you're still single, I assume?" The question hit Olivia like a slap. Before she could formulate a response that wouldn't make her sound pathetic, she felt a strong arm wrap around her shoulders. "Sorry I'm late, sweetheart," came a deep, confident voice from beside her. Olivia turned to find herself looking up at a tall, impeccably dressed stranger with dark hair and striking blue eyes. Without thinking, pure instinct and desperation taking over, she stood on her tiptoes and kissed him full on the lips. To her shock, the stranger didn't pull away. Instead, he returned the kiss with surprising ease, as if they'd done this 100 times before. When they finally broke apart, Olivia turned back to Jason and Vanessa, whose mouths were hanging open in shock. "Actually," Olivia said with newfound confidence, "I'm doing just fine." The stranger's arm remained comfortably around her shoulders as he extended his other hand to Jason. "Alexander Hayes," he introduced himself smoothly. "And you are—" Jason looked like he'd swallowed something unpleasant. "Jason Miller. This is my fiancée, Vanessa." "Lovely to meet you both," Alexander replied with a polite smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "If you'll excuse us, we have dinner reservations." And with that, he guided Olivia out of the store, leaving a stunned Jason and Vanessa behind. Once they were safely outside the jewelry store, Olivia immediately stepped away from Alexander, her face burning with embarrassment. "I am so sorry," she blurted out, covering her face with her hands. "I don't normally go around kissing strangers. I swear I'm not crazy." Alexander Hayes adjusted his tailored suit jacket, an amused expression playing on his lips. "That's a relief to hear, though I have to say, as far as first impressions go, yours was certainly memorable." Olivia peeked through her fingers. "I was desperate. My ex was there with his new fiancé, and I just panicked." "The photographer with the model?" Alexander asked, raising an eyebrow. "You know who they are?" "No, but it was fairly obvious he works with models. The way he was framing her with his hands when she tried on the ring, classic photographer habit." He extended his hand formally. "Alexander Hayes, since we've already kissed, I figure we should at least know each other's names." "Olivia Bennet," she replied, shaking his hand. graphic designer and apparently impulsive kisser of strangers. Alexander chuckled, a warm sound that somehow eased her embarrassment. Well, Olivia Bennett, I think you owe me dinner for using me as your escape plan. Her eyes widened. Oh, I couldn't possibly. I'm kidding, he said, then paused. Unless you're free tonight. Olivia studied him more carefully. Alexander Hayes was undeniably handsome, with his dark hair styled perfectly and those piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through her. His suit was clearly expensive, the kind of bespoke tailoring that screamed success. Under normal circumstances, she would never cross paths with someone like him. Why would you want to have dinner with someone who ambushed you with a kiss? She asked suspiciously. Let's just say you've made my otherwise boring day infinitely more interesting, he replied with a slight smile. Plus, I'm genuinely curious about what kind of person kisses a complete stranger to make their ex jealous. A desperate one, Olivia admitted. I prefer spontaneous, Alexander countered. So? Dinner? I know a place nearby that makes excellent pasta. Olivia hesitated. On one hand, going to dinner with a stranger seemed reckless. On the other hand, what did she have to lose? Her day couldn't possibly get any worse. Fine, she finally agreed. But just so we're clear, this isn't a date. It's reparations for the unauthorized kiss. Alexander's eyes sparkled with amusement. Of course, strictly business. As they walked toward his car, a sleek black Aston Martin that made Olivia's eyes widen, she couldn't help but wonder what kind of bizarre twist of fate had led her to this moment. Little did she know, this impromptu dinner would change the course of her life in ways she could never have imagined. The restaurant Alexander chose was exactly the kind of place Olivia would never enter on her own, a Michelin-starred establishment where the menu had no prices and the waiter spoke in hushed, reverent tones. She fidgeted with her casual attire, acutely aware of how out of place she looked among the well-dressed patrons. Relax, Alexander said, noticing her discomfort as they were seated at a secluded corner table. The food is worth the pretentiousness. Easy for you to say, Olivia whispered back. You look like you belong here. I look like I took a wrong turn on my way to a coffee shop. Alexander smiled. You look fine. Besides, I own 30% of this restaurant, so no one will dare say anything. Olivia nearly choked on her water. You own part of this place? Who exactly are you? I told you, I'm Alexander Hayes. Yes, but what do you do, besides own fancy restaurants and rescue women from awkward encounters with their exes? Alexander took a sip of his wine before answering. I'm the founder and CEO of Horizon Software. We develop AI solutions for healthcare systems. Now, Olivia really did choke on her water. Horizon Software was one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the country. She'd read about them in business magazines. So you're rich, she stated bluntly. I prefer financially comfortable, he replied with a hint of a smile. And what about you? Tell me more about Olivia Bennett, graphic designer and impulsive kisser. Over appetizers, Olivia found herself sharing more than she intended about her struggling freelance business, her dreams of starting her own design agency, and yes, even the humiliating breakup with Jason 6 months ago. Hemp said I wasn't ambitious enough, she admitted, stabbing at her salad, that I was playing it safe with my career. And what do you think? Alexander asked, studying her intently. I think he was projecting. Jason's the one who's always chasing the next big thing, or in this case, the next model, she sighed. But maybe he was right. I haven't exactly taken many risks lately. Alexander nodded thoughtfully, then set down his fork. Olivia, I have a proposition for you. If it involves more kissing, I should warn you I've filled my stranger kissing quota for the year, she joked. Nothing like that, he assured her, though his eyes twinkled with amusement. I need a girlfriend. Olivia blinked. Excuse me? Not a real one, he clarified quickly. A pretend one, for 1 month. She stared at him, waiting for the punchline. When none came, she asked, "Are you serious?" "Completely. You see, I have a major investor conference coming up, followed by my parents' 40th anniversary celebration. My mother has been trying to set me up with every eligible woman in her social circle, and my board members keep hinting that a stable personal life would improve company image. So you want me to, what? Pretend to be madly in love with you?" "Essentially, yes. Attend some events, meet my family, convince everyone we're a couple. After a month, we have an amicable breakup and go our separate ways." Olivia laughed incredulously. "This is insane. Why me? You could hire an actress or ask a friend." "An actress would be too obvious, and friends are complicated," he explained. "You, however, are perfect, intelligent, genuine, and after that kiss in the jewelry store, clearly convincing." "What's in it for me?" she asked, surprising herself with the question. Was she actually considering this? Alexander leaned forward. "I'll pay you, of course. Plus, I have connections in the design world. I could introduce you to potential clients, maybe even help you start that agency you mentioned." Olivia's heart raced. This was crazy, absolutely crazy. Yet somehow, the most reckless decision of her day wasn't kissing a stranger, it was considering his offer. "A month," she said finally, "and I want everything in writing." Alexander smiled, extending his hand across the table. "Dear, this is ridiculous," Olivia muttered the next day as Alexander led her through an exclusive boutique where the sales associates seemed to materialize and disappear like well-dressed ghosts. "I don't need new clothes." "You said yourself you don't have anything suitable for the events we'll be attending," Alexander replied calmly, nodding at a saleswoman who approached with a selection of dresses. "Consider it an investment in our cover story." "Our cover story doesn't require a $3,000 dress," she protested, glancing at a price tag and nearly fainting. Alexander gently pushed the tag out of her sight. "My fake girlfriend wouldn't worry about price tags." "Your fake girlfriend is having an existential crisis," Olivia muttered, but allowed herself to be guided toward the fitting rooms. 3 hours and several boutiques later, Olivia had acquired more designer clothing than she'd owned in her entire life. Alexander insisted on adding accessories, shoes, and even a small collection of evening bags that cost more than her monthly rent. "This feels wrong," she said, as they left the final store, shopping bags being loaded into Alexander's car by an attentive sales associate. "Like I'm taking advantage." "You're doing me a favor," he reminded her. "Besides, you'll need to look the part when you meet my colleagues tonight." Olivia froze. "Tonight? You didn't mention anything about tonight." "Didn't I?" "Small oversight. It's just a cocktail reception at my company headquarters. Nothing formal." "Nothing formal," she repeated weakly. "Just meeting the entire executive team of one of the most successful tech companies in the country while pretending to be dating their CEO. Totally casual." Alexander's lips twitched with amusement. "You'll be fine. Just be yourself, well, a version of yourself who's madly in love with me." "I'm starting to think that kiss was the worst decision of my life," Olivia groaned. The Horizon Software headquarters was a gleaming tower of glass and steel in the heart of downtown. As they rode the elevator to the top floor, Olivia smoothed down her new navy blue cocktail dress for the 100th time. "Remember," Alexander said quietly, "we met at a charity auction 3 months ago. You outbid me for a painting you knew I wanted, and I asked you to dinner to convince you to sell it to me." "Did I sell it to you?" Olivia asked, trying to memorize their fabricated history. "No," he replied with a genuine smile. "You still have it. That's when I knew you were special." The elevator doors opened before she could respond, revealing a stunning rooftop space filled with elegantly dressed people, mingling against the backdrop of city lights. Alexander placed his hand on the small of her back, guiding her into the room. Immediately, heads turned in their direction. Olivia felt her pulse quicken as curious eyes assessed her. "Alexander, there you are." called a striking woman with short, silver hair, approaching them with 2 champagne flutes. "And who is this?" "Claire," Alexander greeted her warmly. "This is Olivia Bennett, my girlfriend. Olivia, this is Claire Winters, our Chief Operating Officer, and the person who actually runs the company, while I take all the credit." Claire's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose slightly as she handed them each a glass. "Girlfriend? How interesting. Alexander has never mentioned you before." "Likes to keep his personal life private," Olivia replied smoothly, surprising herself with her confidence. "But I've heard wonderful things about you, Claire." Claire's calculating gaze swept over Olivia, clearly assessing everything from her dress to her posture. "Have you? And what exactly do you do?" "Olivia? I'm a graphic designer." "How creative," Clara replied with a thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. "And how did you two meet?" As Alexander launched into their rehearsed story, Olivia realized she had just encountered her first test, and Claire Winters was clearly not convinced. This charade was going to be much harder than she thought. Over the next 2 weeks, Olivia found herself living a double life. By day, she worked on her graphic design projects in Alexander's spacious guest room, which he had converted into a home office for her. By night, she accompanied him to business dinners, charity galas, and industry events, playing the role of the devoted girlfriend. To her surprise, it was becoming easier to pretend. Alexander was thoughtful in ways she hadn't expected, remembering how she took her coffee, asking about her projects, even defending her creative choices when a particularly difficult client questioned her designs during a dinner where she'd brought her portfolio. "You don't have to do that," she told him afterward as they walked along the waterfront, her heels dangling from her fingers. "Stand up for me with clients, I mean. It's not part of our agreement." "I wasn't doing it for the agreement," Alexander replied, his hands in his pockets as he looked out at the moonlit water. "Your work is exceptional. That client is an idiot if he can't see it." Olivia felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the mild evening air. "Thank you. That means a lot, especially coming from someone who probably sees world-class design every day." "I do," he agreed, turning to look at her, "which is how I know talent when I see it." Their eyes met for a moment too long, and Olivia quickly looked away, suddenly aware of how romantic their moonlit walk might appear to an observer. The line between pretending and reality was beginning to blur. The following Saturday, they attended a tech industry gala where, to Olivia's dismay, Jason was photographing the event. He did a double take when he saw her enter, on Alexander's arm, wearing a stunning red gown that made her feel like a different person entirely. "Olivia?" Jason approached during a moment when Alexander had stepped away to speak with a colleague. "Wow, you look different." "Hello, Jason," she replied coolly. "Working the event?" "Yeah, they hired me last minute." His eyes traveled over her dress, then to Alexander across the room. "So, you and Alexander Hayes, huh? That's, unexpected." The implication in his tone was clear. What would someone like Alexander see in someone like her? "Life is full of surprises," she said, fighting to maintain her composure. "How did you even meet someone like him?" Jason pressed. "I mean, he's basically tech royalty, and you're—" "She's brilliant, talented, and the most genuine person in this room full of pretentious tech bros," Alexander's voice cut in as he returned to Olivia's side, sliding an arm around her waist. "Which is exactly why I fell for her." Jason's face reddened. "I didn't mean—" "I think you did," Alexandra replied pleasantly, but with steel beneath his smile. "If you'll excuse us, I'd like to dance with my girlfriend." As Alexander led her to the dance floor, Olivia whispered, "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," he said, pulling her close as the music slowed. "No one talks to you that way, not even when we're just pretending." As they swayed to the music, Olivia rested her head against Alexander's chest, hearing the steady beat of his heart. This was all for show, she reminded herself. The protective arm around her waist, the way his thumb traced small circles on her back, the gentle way he looked at her. It was all part of the act. So why did it feel so real? Later that night, as they drove home in comfortable silence, Olivia caught herself watching Alexander's profile, illuminated by passing streetlights. She admired the strong line of his jaw, the thoughtful expression in his eyes as he concentrated on the road. With a jolt, she realized she was developing real feelings for a man who was paying her to pretend. A man who would, in less than 2 weeks, thank her for her services and send her on her way. This wasn't part of the plan. This wasn't supposed to happen. But it was happening, and Olivia had no idea how to stop it. Remember, my father is a retired judge who thinks cross-examination is an appropriate dinner conversation technique, Alexander warned, as they drove toward his parents' elegant suburban home. And my mother will ask about our future plans within the first 10 minutes. Olivia smoothed her sundress nervously. Maybe this isn't a good idea. What if they see through us? They won't, he assured her, reaching over to squeeze her hand. The gesture had become natural between them, even when no one was watching. Just be yourself. They'll love you. The real me or the fake girlfriend me? She asked with a weak smile. Alexander glanced at her, his expression serious. I'm not sure there's much difference anymore. Before she could process what that meant, they were pulling into a circular driveway in front of a stately colonial home with perfectly manicured gardens. Alexander's mother, Eleanor Hayes, greeted them at the door with elegant warmth, embracing her son before turning her attention to Olivia. So you're the mysterious girlfriend Alexander has been hiding from us, she said, taking Olivia's hands in hers. I was beginning to think he'd invented you. Mother, Alexander warned, but there was affection in his tone. It's lovely to meet you, Mrs. Hayes, Olivia replied sincerely. Please, call me Eleanor. Come in. Robert is in the living room pretending not to be anxious to meet you. Robert Hayes was indeed waiting, a tall, distinguished man with Alexander's blue eyes and an assessing gaze that made Olivia feel like she was under a microscope. So, he said after introductions were made and drinks were served, Alexander tells us you're a graphic designer. Freelance, is that right? Yes, sir, Olivia replied. I specialize in branding and digital media design. Unstable profession, isn't it? Feast or famine. Dad, Alexander interjected, Olivia is incredibly talented. She just landed the Westbrook campaign. Olivia shot him a surprised look. She hadn't told him about that potential client yet. I have my sources, he murmured to her with a wink before turning back to his father. Her work is exceptional. I'm sure it is, Robert replied, his expression softening slightly. I'm just curious about how you two met. Alexander has been suspiciously vague. As they recounted their fabricated meeting at the charity auction, Olivia found herself embellishing the story with details they hadn't rehearsed. How Alexander had looked in his tuxedo, how she'd noticed him watching her across the room before the bidding started. I knew he wanted that painting, she concluded with a mischievous smile, but I wanted to see how far he'd go to get it. She's been challenging me ever since, Alexander added, looking at her with such convincing affection that Olivia's heart skipped a beat. Eleanor clasped her hands together. That's absolutely charming. Don't you think so, Robert? The judge studied them for a moment, then nodded slowly. I suppose it is. Though, I'm curious what happened to the painting. Olivia froze, realizing they hadn't prepared for this follow-up question. It's hanging in my apartment, Alexander answered smoothly. Olivia gave it to me for my birthday last month, said she'd made me work hard enough for it. The look of surprise on Olivia's face must have seemed like modest embarrassment, because Eleanor sighed happily. That's so romantic. As dinner progressed, Olivia found herself genuinely enjoying the Hayes family's company. By dessert, even Robert was smiling at her stories and asking thoughtful questions about her design work. When Alexander excused himself to help his mother with coffee, Robert leaned toward Olivia. Seems different with you, he said quietly. Happier, less guarded. Olivia felt a pang of guilt. He's special to me, she replied, and was startled to realize how true that statement had become. The guest room is all yours, Alexander said, as he carried Olivia's suitcases into his penthouse apartment. Though we should probably make it look like we share the master bedroom, in case anyone drops by unexpectedly. After the dinner with his parents, they had agreed that cohabitation would make their relationship more convincing. It was a practical decision, Olivia told herself, ignoring the flutter in her stomach as she followed him through the sleek, minimalist space. Your place is exactly how I imagined it would be, she commented, taking in the floor-to-ceiling windows, modern furniture, and meticulously organized bookshelves. Very orderly. Alexander raised an eyebrow. Is that your polite way of saying boring? Not boring, she clarified, just very you. Everything has its place. Within 3 days, Olivia had disrupted his perfectly ordered world. Her sketches covered the dining table, colorful sticky notes adorned his refrigerator, and her collection of ceramic mugs had somehow migrated from her boxes to his kitchen cabinets. Do you really need 6 different mugs? Alexander asked one morning, finding her working at the dining table, surrounded by coffee cups in various states of emptiness. Each one serves a different purpose, she explained seriously. This one is for the first coffee of the day, this one is for mid-morning inspiration, this one is for... I get it, he interrupted, but he was smiling. You're a chaos agent. And you're a control freak, she countered cheerfully. But we're making it work. They were, surprisingly. Despite their different habits, they fell into a comfortable routine. Alexander would make breakfast before heading to the office, and Olivia would clean up afterward. She'd work on her designs during the day, and in the evening, they'd often cook dinner together, discussing their days. It felt domestic, it felt real. One evening, after a particularly successful day where Olivia had landed a new client, legitimately, without Alexander's help, he surprised her with a small velvet box. What's this? She asked, opening it to find a delicate silver necklace with a small pendant shaped like a paintbrush. I saw it and thought of you, he said simply. Consider it a congratulations gift for the new client. Olivia touched the pendant gently. It's beautiful, but you don't have to buy me things. I wanted to, he replied, taking the necklace and moving behind her to fasten it around her neck. His fingers brushed against her skin, sending shivers down her spine. It suits you. As she looked at her reflection in the window, the necklace glinting in the city lights, Olivia realized with startling clarity that she was falling in love with Alexander Hayes. And in just 1 week, their arrangement would come to an end. That night, lying in the guest bed, Olivia touched the necklace and allowed herself to imagine, just for a moment, what it would be like if this were all real, if Alexander's touches and glances and gifts meant what she wanted them to mean. But they didn't. They couldn't. This was business for him, a convenient solution to a temporary problem, and soon she would go back to her real life, carrying these memories and a heart that would need serious mending. The investor conference, the final event of their arrangement, was a resounding success. Alexander's presentation impressed everyone, and Olivia played her part perfectly, charming investors and board members alike. Even Claire Winters had grudgingly warmed to her, commenting that Alexander seemed more focused since Olivia had come into his life. As they returned to the penthouse that night, the air between them felt heavy with unspoken words. Their month was up. The charade was over. You were amazing tonight, Alexander said as he loosened his tie, standing by the windows overlooking the city. Everyone loved you. That was the goal, right? Olivia replied, trying to keep her tone light as she slipped off her heels. Mission accomplished. Alexander turned to face her, his expression unreadable. I've had my assistant prepare the final payment, and I've made some calls. There are 3 design firms interested in meeting with you. Thank you, she said quietly, her heart sinking at the businesslike tone. This was it then. The end. I suppose I should start packing, she added, moving toward the guest room. Olivia, Alexander called after her, making her pause. These past few weeks, they've been... She waited, hoping against hope for words that might change everything. Very beneficial, he finished. For both of us, I hope. Beneficial. Such a cold, practical word. Olivia forced a smile. Absolutely. You got your fake girlfriend, and I got some great contacts. Win-win. Alexander frowned slightly. Is that all it was to you, a business transaction? The question caught her off guard. Isn't that what it was supposed to be? Yes, but I thought maybe... He ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking less like the confident CEO and more like a man struggling to find the right words. Do you want to stay? Beyond our arrangement, I mean? Olivia's heart raced. Stay as what, Alexander? Your roommate? Your employee? Another month of pretending? I don't know, he admitted. I just know I don't want you to leave. It wasn't enough. After everything they'd shared, after all the feelings she'd developed, she needed more than uncertainty. I can't stay without knowing what this is, she said softly, and I don't think you know either. That night, she packed her things in silence. By morning, she was gone, leaving only a note. Thank you for everything. Oh, she took nothing but her original belongings and the silver necklace she couldn't bear to part with, a memento of what might have been. Alexander stood in the empty guest room, Olivia's note clutched in his hand. The apartment felt hollow without her presence. No colorful sticky notes on the refrigerator, no half-empty coffee mugs scattered around, no soft humming from the dining table where she'd worked on her designs. He hadn't expected to feel this. Emptiness. This arrangement had been his idea, a practical solution to a temporary problem. So why did her absence feel like a permanent loss? You're an idiot, Claire told him bluntly when he called her. That girl was the best thing that's happened to you in years, and you let her walk away. It wasn't real, Alexander insisted. We had an agreement. Maybe it started that way, Claire replied, but I saw how you looked at her at the conference. That wasn't acting, Alex, and from what you're telling me, she felt the same way. Alexander paced his living room, remembering the hurt in Olivia's eyes when he'd called their time together beneficial. What a cold, inadequate word for what had developed between them. I don't know how to fix this, he admitted. Yes, you do, Claire said. You're just afraid to do it. She was right. For all his business acumen, for all his strategic thinking, Alexander Hayes was terrified of the most basic human emotion, love. He had spent years building walls around himself, focusing on success and achievement rather than connection. And then, Olivia had walked into his life with her chaotic energy and genuine warmth, and those walls had begun to crumble. He had fallen in love with her, not with the polished girlfriend she pretended to be at events, but with the real Olivia. The one who left coffee rings on his expensive furniture, who sang off-key in the shower, who challenged his ideas and made him laugh like no one else could. And he had let her go. Across town, Olivia sat in her tiny apartment, surrounded by the boxes she hadn't yet unpacked. It felt strange to be back in her old space after living in Alexander's penthouse. Everything here seemed smaller, dimmer somehow. Her phone buzzed with a text from a number she didn't recognize. Ms. Cooper, this is Eleanor Hayes. I hope you don't mind, but Alexander gave me your number some time ago. Would you be available for lunch tomorrow? There's something I'd like to discuss with you. Olivia stared at the message, her heart racing. What could Alexandra's mother possibly want to discuss now that the fake relationship was over? Against her better judgment, she replied, I'd be happy to meet you, Mrs. Hayes. Just let me know when and where. Whatever Eleanor wanted, Olivia knew one thing for certain. She wasn't over Alexander Hayes. Not by a long shot. Eleanor Hayes was already seated at an elegant cafe when Olivier arrived, looking poised in a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than Olivier's monthly rent. "Thank you for meeting me," Eleanor said warmly as Olivia sat down. "I hope I'm not overstepping." "Not at all," Olivia replied, though she wasn't entirely sure that was true. "I'm just curious about why you wanted to see me." Eleanor studied her for a moment. "My son is miserable," she said finally. "He won't admit it, of course. He's always been stubborn that way, but a mother knows." Olivia's heart clenched. "I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm not sure what it has to do with me. Our relationship was—" She hesitated, unsure how much Alexander had revealed to his family. "Fake?" Eleanor supplied, surprising Olivia. "Yes, he told us everything yesterday. Rather dramatically, I might add. Showed up at Sunday dinner looking like he hadn't slept in days and confessed the whole scheme." Olivia felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. "Mrs. Hayes, I'm so sorry for the deception. I never meant to—" Eleanor waved away her apology. "Please, call me Eleanor. And there's no need to apologize. In fact, I should thank you." "Thank me?" "For bringing my son back to life," Eleanor explained. "Alexander has always been driven, focused on success to the exclusion of almost everything else. After what happened with his ex-fiancée 3 years ago, he retreated even further into his work. But with you, he was different." Olivia absorbed this information, trying to reconcile it with the Alexander she knew. He never mentioned a fiancé. "She left him for his former business partner," Eleanor said quietly. "It was quite the scandal in our circles, and it hit Alexander hard. Not just the betrayal, but the public humiliation. Since then, he's kept everyone at arm's length. Until your arrangement," she continued, "which, according to him, stopped being pretend somewhere along the way, at least for him." Olivia's heart skipped a beat. "He said that?" "Not in so many words," Eleanor admitted with a small smile. "But when Robert asked if he was in love with you, Alexander couldn't deny it, and that's when he told us everything." Olivia sat back, stunned. Alexander was in love with her? After all his talk about their arrangement being beneficial? After letting her walk away without a fight? "I don't understand," she said finally. "If he feels that way, why didn't he say something?" "Fear, I imagine," Eleanor replied. "The same reason he threw himself into that ridiculous fake relationship scheme instead of simply asking you out properly in the first place. My son is brilliant at business but remarkably obtuse when it comes to matters of the heart." She reached across the table and patted Olivia's hand. "I'm not telling you this to pressure you. If you don't share his feelings, that's perfectly fine. But if you do," she smiled gently, "well, sometimes even brilliant men need a little help seeing what's right in front of them." As Olivia left the cafe, her mind was racing. Alexander Hayes, controlled, confident, seemingly untouchable. Alexander was in love with her. And if Eleanor was to be believed, he was miserable without her. The question was, what was she going to do about it? Olivia stood outside Alexander's office building, her heart pounding. After her lunch with Eleanor, she'd spent 2 days wrestling with her feelings, trying to decide what to do. In the end, she realized she couldn't walk away without knowing the truth, without hearing it from Alexander himself. Taking a deep breath, she pushed through the revolving doors and approached the reception desk. "I need to see Alexander Hayes," she said with more confidence than she felt. The receptionist looked up skeptically. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but—" "Olivia?" She turned to see Claire Winters approaching, a knowing smile on her face. "I thought that was you. Come with me. I'll take you up." In the elevator, Claire gave her an appraising look. "He's been impossible to work with since you left. The entire executive floor is walking on eggshells." "I heard something similar from his mother," Olivia admitted. Claire raised an eyebrow. "You met with Eleanor? Well, that explains why she canceled his afternoon meetings." She checked her watch. which means he should be alone right now. When they reached the executive floor, Claire pointed toward a set of double doors. "He's all yours. And Olivia, don't let him off easy." Alexander was standing at the window when she entered, his back to the door, phone pressed to his ear. "I don't care what it takes," he was saying. "Just find her and—" "Find who?" Olivia asked. Alexander whirled around, nearly dropping his phone. "I'll call you back," he said quickly, ending the call. For a moment, he just stared at her, as if he couldn't quite believe she was real. "Olivia," he finally said, her name like a prayer on his lips. "What are you doing here?" "I had an interesting lunch with your mother yesterday," she replied, stepping further into the office. "She told me some things I found surprising." Alexander's expression shifted from shock to wariness. "What kind of things?" "That you told your family our relationship was fake, that you've been miserable since I left." She paused, gathering her courage. "That you might have feelings for me, real ones." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she now recognized as nervousness. "My mother shouldn't have interfered." "Is it true?" Olivia pressed, her heart in her throat. Alexander moved from behind his desk, closing the distance between them. "Yes," he admitted quietly. "All of it. I've been trying to find you for days. I went to your apartment, but your neighbors said you'd moved out. I've been calling design firms, thinking you might have started a new job, but no one had heard of you. I've been staying with my friend Mia while I figure things out," she explained. "I needed space to think." "And have you?" he asked, his voice tentative. "Figured things out?" Olivia took a deep breath. "I think I have. But first, I need to know, what do you want, Alexander? Not what's convenient, not what makes business sense. What do you actually want?" He looked at her, vulnerability clear in his eyes. "You," he said simply. "I want you, Olivia. Not as part of an arrangement or a business deal. Just you." Olivia's breath caught in her throat. The raw honesty in Alexander's voice was unlike anything she'd heard from him before. "When you left," he continued, "it felt like all the color drained from my life. I kept expecting to hear your laugh down the hallway or find your coffee mug scattered around the apartment. I even missed finding your sticky notes everywhere." A small smile tugged at her lips. "You complained about those notes constantly." "I know," he admitted, returning her smile. "But now the apartment feels too organized without them, too empty." He took a step closer. "I've spent my whole life planning everything, controlling every variable. Then you came along with your chaos and your warmth, and suddenly all my careful plans didn't matter anymore." "What about your ex-fiancé?" Olivia asked quietly. "Your mother told me what happened." Alexander's expression darkened momentarily. "Vanessa. Yes, that was a difficult time. But it wasn't just the betrayal that hurt. It was realizing our entire relationship had been transactional. She wanted my status. I wanted the perfect partner to complete my perfect life plan." He shook his head. "After that, I decided relationships weren't worth the risk. Until I met you." "We started with a transaction too," Olivia pointed out. "We did," he acknowledged. "But somewhere between your terrible cooking and our late-night conversations, it became real for me. I just didn't know how to tell you. I was afraid you were just fulfilling our agreement, afraid you'd leave once it was over." He gave a rueful laugh. "And then you did leave, and I realized I'd never even given us a chance." Olivia's heart was racing. "So what are you saying, Alexander?" He reached for her hands, holding them gently in his. "I'm saying I love you, Olivia Cooper. Not the polished version you thought I wanted, but the real you. The one who leaves coffee rings on my tables and sings off-key and challenges me at every turn. I love your creativity, your kindness, your determination, and if you'll give me another chance, I promise I won't let fear get in the way again." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes. "I love you too," she whispered. "I tried not to. I told myself it was just an arrangement, that you could never feel the same way, but I couldn't help falling for the man behind the CEO facade, the one who makes terrible jokes and works too hard and cares so deeply about the people in his life. Alexander's face lit up with a joy she'd never seen before. He pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. "So where do we go from here?" "How about we start with a real date?" Olivia suggested, smiling through her tears. "No pretending, no arrangements, just us." "I'd like that," he murmured, his eyes never leaving hers. "Though I should warn you, I have every intention of keeping you in my life for much longer than a month this time." "Is that so?" she teased, her heart full to bursting. "Absolutely," he replied, and then he was kissing her not for show, not for anyone else's benefit, but simply because he couldn't wait another moment to hold her. And this time, when Olivia kissed him back, there was no doubt in either of their minds that it was real. 6 months later, Olivia stood in the center of a bustling gallery, hardly believing her eyes. Her designs, her artwork adorned the walls, and the space was filled with New York's elite, all there to see her first exhibition. "Congratulations," a familiar voice said behind her. She turned to find Eleanor Hayes smiling warmly at her. "I knew you had talent, but this is extraordinary." "Thank you," Olivia replied, still overwhelmed by the evening's success. "I couldn't have done it without your support." It was true. After Olivia and Alexander had reconciled, Eleanor had introduced her to several influential figures in the art world. But it was Olivia's unique designs for modern furniture with artistic elements that told stories that had captured everyone's attention. "Nonsense," Eleanor said, patting her arm. "All I did was make a few introductions. The rest was all you." Alexander appeared at Olivia's side, sliding an arm around her waist. "My mother's right, you know. Your talent did this, not connections." Olivia leaned into him, drawing strength from his presence as she had countless times over the past months. Their relationship had blossomed once they'd let go of pretense, building something real on the foundation of their initial arrangement. 3 more pieces sold," he murmured in her ear. "At this rate, you'll be the one buying penthouses soon." She laughed, remembering how intimidated she'd been by his wealth when they first met. Now she understood that true value had nothing to do with bank accounts or status. "Speaking of homes," Alexander said, his voice suddenly serious, "I've been thinking." "A dangerous pastime," she teased. He smiled, but his eyes remained intent. "Your lease is up next month." "It is," she agreed, wondering where he was going with this. "And you already spend most nights at my place anyway." Olivia's heart skipped a beat. "Alexander Hayes, are you asking me to move in with you, for real this time?" "I am," he confirmed, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. "But I'm also asking something else." The gallery seemed to fade away as he opened the box, revealing a stunning emerald ring surrounded by diamonds. "Olivia Cooper, I love you more than I ever thought possible. Will you marry me?" Tears filled her eyes as the gallery erupted in applause. Apparently their private moment wasn't so private after all. But Olivia didn't care who was watching. All that mattered was the man in front of her, looking at her with such love that it took her breath away. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes." As Alexander slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into a kiss, Olivia marveled at how life could change in an instant. One impulsive kiss with a stranger had led her here, to love, to success, to happiness beyond anything she could have imagined. Sometimes, the most unexpected beginnings led to the most beautiful destinations. 1 year later, Olivia stood on the balcony of their Hamptons beach house, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. Strong arms encircled her from behind, and she leaned back against Alexander's chest. "Happy anniversary, Mrs. Hayes," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Happy anniversary," she replied, turning in his arms to face him. Can you believe it's been a year since our wedding? Best year of my life, he said simply. As they stood together, watching the day fade into night, Olivia thought about the journey that had brought them here, from a fake relationship born of convenience to a love deeper and more real than either of them had dared to hope for. "What are you thinking about?" Alexander asked, noticing her contemplative expression. Olivia smiled, reaching up to touch his face. "Just that sometimes the most beautiful love stories start with a lie." "And end with the truth," he finished, capturing her lips in a kiss that promised forever.